Hey, it is finally time to harvest the sweet potatoes. Let's get started. Good morning, everyone. It is time to harvest the sweet potatoes. These sweet potatoes have been in the ground for over 200 days. The climate you're growing in, as well as the variety of sweet potato you're growing, will determine the number of days to maturity or harvest. Generally speaking, it's 90 to 120, but the sweet potatoes that I was growing, they just weren't ready yet, so I have been letting them continue to grow. I am in southern Arizona, so we have very mild temperatures all throughout the winter. If you're growing in a colder climate where you are experiencing a hard frost before mid-November, which is when I'm filming this, then you want to dig your sweet potatoes sooner than that. So you will probably fall between 90 and 120 days, whereas I can wait a little bit longer and let those sweet potatoes get a little bit bigger before I dig mine out of the ground. To harvest your sweet potatoes, you need a few tools. You can use a garden fork, you can use a shovel, you can use a hand trowel or a hori-hori, which is what I have today. But you need to get something that will allow you to get around the sweet potato bunches that will be developing under the main stem so that you don't scar, cut, damage them in any way. The sweet potato skins are very thin at this point before we cure them, so they're going to be easy to damage, so we need to be careful as we're working. I've done a previous video on harvesting sweet potatoes, but in case you missed it, I will go over some of the signs you need to look for to make sure that your sweet potatoes are ready for harvest. Signs that your sweet potatoes are ready are the number of days, so keep track of when you planted them. I planted mine in mid-March. Another sign is the yellowing or the discoloring of leaves as the temperatures get cooler. Sweet potatoes do not like the cold and they don't tolerate it well at all. So those leaves are going to let you know once the cooler nights have come that the sweet potato vines are starting to die back. My climate may be warm enough that the sweet potato vines will stay green and stay growing throughout the entire winter if I don't get a frost. Sweet potato vines will turn black and they will curl up if they get exposed to any frost at all. So they will tell you if there's been a frost out in your garden for sure. But if you live in a more southern climate like I do here in southern Arizona, the winters may be mild enough that your sweet potatoes will stay green even throughout the winter. So you want to look at the days to maturity or the days to harvest. So keep track of when you planted those potato slips and then really start looking for other signs, like the mounding of sweet potatoes underneath the sweet potato main stem or main crown. So where that sweet potato vine is coming up out of the soil, that is where the majority of the tubers will form, right underneath that. And as those tubers get bigger, that soil is going to start mounding up. You'll be able to take a peek at where that vine is growing up out of the soil, and you can brush away some of that soil, and a lot of times you can see the sweet potatoes and kind of see the size that they're at. So that's another sign that they're ready to go. So we've got days to maturity, we have the leaf color and condition, and we also have mounding around that central stem or crown of the plant. So look for all of those signs. If you see them, it's time to dig, which is what I'm going to do next. So you can see when I find the crown of the sweet potato that it is mounded up right here. And pull away some of this Bermuda grass you can see, but you can peek under here and let me unearth this. There is a sweet potato right here. I don't know if you can see that because it is dark purple. So let me dig around this a little bit. You can take a peek, even if you're not sure about the other signs, just to see if you can find some sweet potatoes directly under where the vine is growing up from the soil. And I see there are a couple of really big ones right here. So if I push back some of these vines, then you can see where that sweet potato stem is going into the ground. I'm just going to take my pruners and I'm going to cut those vines off. That way I can just peel away the top portion and have room to see and to work. I chopped this one in half by accident. I thought it was far enough away from that central stalk, but apparently not. And these though are pretty nice. Look how nice that is. So that's the first two. Those are orange ones. I have purple and orange sweet potatoes planted in here. So I am just gonna take my Hori Hori tool. You can use a hand trowel and just dig around and see if you can find any more next to this main stem. And I think that's it for that one. You can see one peeking out right here, but even if I just barely brush on the sweet potato, I can see it leaves a mark. The skin is very tender. So I'm going to carefully lift these out of the soil. Just look at that. It's a little one, but it is magic. I just think it is so fun to dig root vegetables out of the soil because you never know what you're gonna find in there. Will they be crooked? Will they have 2 or 3 legs? Will they be monsters? So exciting. Wow, look at that one. Oh my gosh. That is crazy. That is so cool. There's a bunch more of these big ones in here too. A lot of them. Well, that one's not so big, but let's see. That one's really nice too. Super, super nice. These ones didn't get so big. That's okay though. Some nice ones right underneath the stem. Try to get those out so you can see them. You can see how they grow right underneath that main stem. It's really easy to find them. Now that we have our potatoes harvested, it is time to move on to the next step of curing and storing. To do that without making a huge mess, you need to just brush off some of the dirt gently from the potatoes. You don't need to wash them or brush them off with a brush or do anything like that. In fact, it's better if you don't do that. You don't want to damage the skin because that can shorten the amount of time that they will store well. So I like to just leave my garden gloves on my hands and just gently brush the loose soil from the potatoes, and that is good enough for now. Sweet potatoes need to be cured because it allows the carbohydrates to convert to sugars, and that is what gives it the sweet flavor that we know and love sweet potatoes for. To cure sweet potatoes, you really need 2 things: warmth and humidity. And in southern Arizona, humidity is not something that we have a lot of. And in the wintertime elsewhere throughout the country, it's also pretty dry. So being able to provide extra humidity is a tricky thing for curing your sweet potatoes. I have a solution for providing both warmth and humidity for sweet potatoes that I think is pretty easy, and that is by using a basic cooler. So this is just an inexpensive Rubbermaid cooler that I have in my garage. I've brought it out and I have put my sweet potatoes into the cooler. I like to spread them out in an even layer, no doubling up, and I like them to have some space in between. I don't want them to touch because just like with other root vegetables, if they are touching, one and one goes bad, then that bacteria can then transfer to the other, and then it can make them all go bad. So I like to have them spread evenly with a little bit of space in between. It's great for airflow too. The next thing that I did is put a jar of water inside the cooler with the sweet potatoes. Now when I filled up this jar of water, I filled it up with hot water, and I put it in here just a couple of hours ago, and when I just got it out to show you all, it felt warm inside this cooler. So I am hoping that this will provide both moisture and humidity as the water slowly evaporates from this jar, and that my sweet potatoes will be good to go for a couple of weeks. Now you really only have to do this warm and humid curing process for sweet potatoes for a week or two, and then you can move on to cold storage. And that is just, where are you going to keep your sweet potatoes over the winter to keep them fresh until you can eat them all? If you don't have a cooler, you could use a Rubbermaid tub with a lid on it. And if you don't have that, you could use just a plain plastic grocery bag. Just layer your potatoes in there, as I said, make sure they're not touching and that they're in an even layer, and then just tie the bag up and set it out of the direct sunlight in the warmest spot in your house. And that should also trap some of the humidity from the sweet potatoes in the bag. If you live in a climate where your garage will stay above freezing all winter, then that is a perfect spot for your sweet potatoes. Somewhere around 50 to 60 degrees is a great cold storage temperature for your sweet potatoes. If you don't have a garage that will stay above freezing, or maybe you don't have a garage at all, you can alternatively use a pantry or a closet or a cabinet that is dark and cool. Just find some place in your house that is as cool as possible. You don't have to provide humidity during this time. So just make sure that your sweet potatoes are spread out evenly wherever you put them, whether they're in a box or a basket or maybe on a shelf. I like to leave that gap in between the sweet potatoes, again, so that they aren't touching and risking contaminating one another if one goes bad. If you cure your sweet potatoes and then find a good cool place to store them in for the winter, they can last up to 6 months or longer. All right, thank you all so much for hanging out with me today and digging up the sweet potatoes. I hope that you know exactly what you need to do now to harvest, cure, and store your sweet potatoes. I'm Kara from Arizona. Until next time, happy gardening.